All right. Well, welcome everybody. If you are just joining us for the first time, we're happy that you're here. My name is Rachel, and this is Josh. And we
Hello.
are an accountant, which would be Josh, and a lawyer, that would be me, walk into a bar. If you were with us for the first installment, welcome back. And we're excited to be continuing down the journey of growing and scaling a brewery. So with that, we'll get into like the formal introductions. So, you know, when I started creating the materials for this, I think I kind of it was like that blurry screen that like, you know, flashback or like go into like a weird dream sequence or something. And it's like imagine that your brewery has been around for about 1 year now. And you're in your celebrating. It's the end of the night. You've been drinking your beers and just celebrating that it's been a year that you've been operating this thing. And you're like, okay, so now what? What do we do now? We accomplished this big goal. We got started. We dealt with all of the pains of construction and figuring out our beers and figuring out the names, probably changing them several times. Hiring people, firing people, most likely, making it through that first year is a massively huge milestone. And everyone who has done it in any business should just be patting themselves on the back. I am doing it as I speak because I've been doing it for 8 years now. But now what do we do? What's the next step? Where do we go from here? And so when Josh and I were talking about, the next years and beyond, what things do we need to be thinking about? And because we had 5 areas last time, I think we thought 5 was a good number to deal with this time. So the 5 areas that we wanted to kind of focus on were processes, people, additional capital, strategic planning, and expansion. And so we're going to take each one of those like we did last time. And as you can see, we have graphics this time, so it's a little bit more fun to look at. So let's jump into our first area, which would be processes. So when we say processes, Josh, I'll punt it over to you. When we were talking about processes, what were you and I kicking around?
Yeah, processes, anytime you're trying to grow or scale a company, you have to have these kind of core processes in place that everyone knows and understands and gets. Probably because if you don't have them in place, then everyone's kind of doing their own thing, and you can't grow a business that way, right? If no one understands how this particular area of the business works, you're not going to you can't grow. You can't get out of the cycle that you're in. You can't remove yourself from doing some of that stuff, right? And so when we talk about process, it could be a lot of different things, right? Obviously everyone's got the beer brewing process pretty down pat, right? Like that's the thing you do,
we
right?
Hope so.
Yeah, we hope so, right? if that's every time
first year, I hope at least you now know how to brew a beer.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a surprise each time you brew. Like, what do we do now? Like, how does this thing work? See, everyone's got that process down, but it's the other processes that kind of are around the business, the actual kind of business type process that kind of sit around that. Are the ones where people kind of like, I don't know what to do. I'm just kind of figuring out on my own. Like, there's not a set way I'm going about doing it. And so we kind of, we'll talk through some of these kind of processes that kind of sit around there. But I think it's kind of important too to kind of look at, okay, why are these actually important? Why do we actually need these, right? I think one of the biggest thing is really kind of that consistency. So if you're growing your company, right? Like the way you do it should be the same. Every process should be the same every time, right? Whether it's the we're opening it up for the day process, or we are hiring, or we are selling our beer through distribution channels. Like, what is that process and how are we doing it? And that should be consistent. And if that's not consistent, then if we're redoing it or relearning it every time, we can't really grow that way. It should be something that someone can pick up and go and do. And not have to like rethink about how do we go about doing that each time we do it. And I think it's also important too because it brings in some structural elements to the brewery. And I think for a lot of brewers who are very creative types, structure can be something they're trying to avoid or not necessarily want. But in order to have something that can actually grow, you have to have structure in place. It's like building a house, but not like putting in the foundation and the load bearing walls and things like that, right? Because it's a nice facade outside outside your house and looks out great on the outside, that's great. But if there's nothing inside that's actually holding it up, as much of duct tape and good wishes, right? Then that's not going to be something you can build on, right? It's not going to stand that. And I think too, one of the things, particularly as breweries grow, a lot of times the owners are very involved in every process. And at some point you want to get away from that, right? At some point you want to take a vacation. At some point you want to actually do what needs to be done for growing the brewery and not have to be working in the brewery constantly. And so putting these processes in place gives you that freedom to basically allow other people to take that process, execute that process without you having to be involved each time that happens. So whether it is, brewing a beer, right? Like at some point you're going to have to hand this off to an assistant brewer or someone else, and they should be able to take what you've done and be able to execute the recipes, execute the finished product. So when you're not doing it, they can actually do it and get that same result. And by doing all that stuff, by the consistency and the structure in place and the freedom, that allows you to then scale, right? That allows you to then have those processes run in and continue to occur without having to be involved in it, and allows you to grow and also add in more people. And when you add in more people, they can execute that process and not have to redo the process each time, right? So I think process, in any business are really important, but as you're trying to grow and scale, really having those are important to be able to do that.
I second that. And thinking about, a lot of what we're going to be talking about, probably everything is obviously tailored to our brewery, but at the end of the day, these are any business needs to go through these types of things. And I've owned my business for almost 8 years. And I can say that, when it was just me sitting at my desk, I created whatever process seemed to work in my very strange brain. And so when I brought people in, I realized that I'm really weird and my processes may not be the right processes for everybody. No one understands them and they're inefficient. So it's not just having processes, but are these the best processes? Are they the most efficient? Are they getting the job done? And, as you said, Josh, I think that breweries owners, people get into brewing beer because I think they want to get away from some of this corporate stuff we're talking about. And I think, and I get that. I do. But I can say this, the second that you are pulled away from your business, be it for a reason because you've got a family emergency or something, or you actually want to take a vacation, because like it or not, you're going to want to do it. Like while brewing beer, probably is the super funnest thing ever. You're going to want to go sit on a beach at some point. And you're not going to be able to do that if your people don't know how to do stuff while you're away, or you're going to go away and you're going to get called every 10 seconds. And that's not a vacation. So the point is that soon the business cannot simply just rest on your shoulders alone. You've got to learn, you've got to put these processes in place. We're going to talk about delegation. And I speak for anyone who has ever grown a business. It is hard. I'm not making light of that. It's emotionally hard, but it's important that we point that out. And we're going to kind of dive in a little bit to more, specifics processes that we think are really important for the brewers out there. So the three that we identified that we wanted to really kind of touch on today were selling and marketing, distribution, and R&D. So selling and marketing, what is your process so you make your beer, and now you've got to get it into the bellies of your very, very enthusiastic consumers. So from fermenter to belly, how is that happening? Do you know how that's happening? More important. And we call that, in the world of marketing, it's marketing channels, your marketing mix, if you will. And there's probably a lot of different ways that your beer and the name of your brewery and your brand is getting out there. So we obviously have sales reps. Hopefully at this point, you've gotten to a point where you've got one or two that are going out to retail establishments and they are pounding the pavement, selling, getting accounts to sell your beer. So that's one process. Branding. Obviously, at this point, we hope that the name of the brewery has been cleared and trademarked. The beer names have been cleared and trademarked. and that we find that the public is liking them, that your target audience is finding you, liking you, and all of that is working. I like to tell the story of, if anyone's familiar with Goodwood Brewing up in Kentucky. That was not the original name of that brewery. I think it was Bluegrass Brewing. And they just were struggling. They were struggling for a really long time. And the owner of the brewery, and I saw him at a conference a few years ago, he said they brought in an outside marketing team and they completely rebranded everything, because their kind of differentiating factor is that all of their beer touches wood. They age everything. And so hence the name Goodwood came about. And it's been a much more successful branding for them. So is the brand doing what it needs to be doing, or do we need to think about rebranding? And I know that sounds scary, but now is the time you want to really be thinking about that. You never want to, after your first year, you don't start sitting on your laurels and thinking to yourself, oh, I'm just going to, just let it coast on through. Well, yeah, you can, but that doesn't mean that you're going to, be profitable and grow and expand. The point, if you're watching this webinar, the hope is that you want to continue growing your business. So content, I say web content, but that also can include the I think the fifth bullet down, print advertising, your social media, your website content, or any other outlet of media that is talking about your brewery and your beer. Any events that you're doing, internal and external. If you're doing, if you're having, trivia nights, are you doing live music? Are you doing, now the big thing is yoga with beer, all of these things. And then, of course, going to festivals, going to conferences. I'm wondering if a lot of people are not on this because GABF is starting, those types of things. Are you maximizing your appearance at these things? And then other new marketing channels. Seriously, who knew that people are going to want to grab their yoga mats, roll them out in a brewery, and drink beer while doing yoga? That's the thing. It's not just you do yoga and then you drink a beer. Now it's doing yoga whilst drinking beer. Who knew that was a thing? It's like goat yoga. It's like this new fad thing. So, pushing yourself into newer things, trying out different, maybe sponsoring new types of events that no one has sponsored before, always making sure that you are staying relevant, current, and fresh with all of your marketing mix. Josh, did you want to add anything on this?
No, I think you hit it all there. And I think this is one that you really want to spend some time focusing on, whether it's someone internally or you hire that out, but have a focus that you're staying on this. It always looks bad when you go, you're searching for breweries and you go look at a brewery's website or their social media and it hasn't been posted on it for a while. It's like, they still care, are they there, right?
That's a death sentence right there.
Yeah.
That's just for a brewery, it's to anybody.
Yeah.
So I'll tell a little story about our firm. So, I am like any other entrepreneur. I did all the things in my firm when I first started. And I have a marketing degree. So, of course, I was the lawyer that did marketing. Yeah, that was smart. I woke up, I was actually tried to build my own website when I first started. And I woke up like bolt upright in bed first year of my business. And I said, Rachel, you are a lawyer. You are not a web designer. Go and hire one. And that's basically what I've done ever since. And today I have a marketing team that I pay awesome amounts of money. I actually would love to give them even more money, frankly. I'm at that point with them where I'm like, oh my God, please don't ever leave me. And they make sure that we are staying on top of all this stuff, because the second you become irrelevant is when you start to lose clientele. And for beer, it's there's somebody new coming up behind you before you even realize it. So we've got to make sure we're staying fresh and relevant all the time. It's so important.
Yep.
Distribution. I remember when I was putting the slide together, I said to myself, the two words that describe distributors, necessary evil. I think that is the best way to say it. And surprisingly, that's what people say about you and me, Josh. They call us necessary evils too all the time. A lot of you may have been self-distributing in your first year. And you know what? You did that to save money. You didn't want to give a piece of anything, of your very awesome product that you spent a lot of time developing and making and your blood, sweat, and tears into doing. and you don't want to give any of it away to a distributor. Well, you probably, if you haven't already figured out, that the reason that distributors are around is because they can go places and get outside of a certain area that you just can't do. And that's all they do. All they do is pick up your beer and they give it to people. That's all they do. And if you're spinning your wheels, spending all your time doing that, I can tell you right now that is not the best use of your time. Okay. So distributors, like I said, we all know them. We all hate them. We all love them, whatever you want to say about them. So you want to evaluate this relationship like you want to do with any relationship, internal or external. And the fundamental question is the relationship working for you? And some of the things I want, kind of put bug in your ear about is, are you having open and honest communication with them, even when the news is bad? If they say, say they had, a pallet of beer that went bad because they had a power outage in their warehouse, are they going to tell you that when it happens? Or are they going to say it like, oh yeah, this happened like 6 months ago? Like, that's a problem. Okay. Do they know your brand and the consumer of your brand? If they're trying to sell your beer if you are a local craft beer and you don't want to be anywhere near, some of like here in Nashville, for example, the downtown scene is a very different place than some of the local places. If anyone knows anything about Nashville right now, the Bachelorettes like to go downtown. And you know what kind of beer they like? They like to drink your major brewers. I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay. Now, the craft beer brewers do like to try to get into downtown. It's very difficult these days because of, so much competition for taps. But is that really the most ideal place for them? That depends. But if you've got a distributor that's basically just, trying to go wherever they can, or they're going way, way, way too far outside, that's something, how much do they care about your brand? Managing expectations. Did you expect that your distributor was going to really, really champion your brand? If you did, then you didn't talk to enough brewers before you started this thing, because there's very few distributors that do. I wish I could paint it a different way, but there just isn't. I know in my market, it's just not done. Now we are seeing, I have a client that is a distributor, and he probably loves craft beer more than he loves his family. I'm pretty sure that's the truth with him. And he is the biggest champion of the brands that he distributes, but he's a rare one. He's a rare one. The big guys, they will champion major labels. Like Lippman Brothers, they carry Jack Daniels. Yeah, that they're kissing ass to Jack Daniels on a daily basis. If Jack Daniels is unhappy, they know about it and they fix it. But if really tiny startup brewery is unhappy, they don't care. And so you got to know that. So, fundamentally, are they truly invested in your brand and your business goals? If they're not, then maybe we need to figure out how to get out of that relationship, which I'm about to engage on that with another client, is a lot easier said than done. And so we want to, if we need to get out of the relationship, then we need to be talking to our attorney about how can we get out of this relationship as unscathed as possible. But is it worth it to stay in the relationship if they're not selling your brand and your kind of business lives or dies on how much they're selling? It may be worth it to try to buy them out of the contract, which is a lot of the times what has to happen. Josh, you have anything else to add on the wonderful world of distribution?
Yeah, I think with distributors, when you first sign on with them, they are going to love you and think you're the greatest thing in the world, and then that ends 2 weeks later when they sign on the next brewer, right? So I think what Rachel said, having that open, honest communication, being invested in that relationship and making sure that they still understand you, that when you make major changes, you let them know. Like, if, hey, we're rolling out this beer series, let them know about it. Keep them knowledgeable in that, because they are representing a bunch of different breweries. And while they would like to keep up on all of them and understand exactly what's going on at every single point in time with everyone's brewery, that's not realistic. So you need to be proactive in that communication, and do the work of providing them that information so then they can go and sell it. They can go and distribute it. And you're not doing that work yourself, right? But you have to have that communication with them and be proactive in that.
Yeah. And, a shout out to one of our distributors here in Middle Tennessee, Best Brands. They actually, the owner of the company, he decided to host a homebrew competition. He invited several of us in the industry to judge that. And the prize was that the brewery that was hosting it was going to make the beer. and then can it, and then Best Brands is going to distribute it across the state. I mean, that's a hell of a prize if you're a home brewer, let me tell you. As a judge, we got I think we had over 100 entries, and it wasn't style specific, so my palate was wrecked after that. Let's just say we went from like 30 IPAs to like stouts, and I was like, oh my God. I think we're going to change the parameters a bit, but they do intend to do that regularly. And I think, that's a rare thing. That's a very unprecedented thing. I've not seen that in any other distributors in town doing something like that, really supporting the industry. But I know that I'm sure in each of your jurisdictions, somebody is being supportive. So find that distributor if you haven't signed with them yet. And if you sign with the wrong distributor, like I said, you can get out. It's going to probably cost you, and you're going to want to just simply run those numbers as to, is it more profitable for us to stay in or to get out at the end of the day? Okay. Finally, R&D. R&D, and when we're talking about this, we're really talking about, craft beer is just innovating. The United States is some of the most innovative brewers of beer in the world. I mean, the sour movement, aging, all of these things that are going on. I mean, it's just crazy. So, I mean, you've got to start thinking about, where is the market going? Understand, keeping track of, and being aware of consumer trends. I have recently become gluten-free, which I'm sure you all just collectively were sad for me. As you should be. It sucks. But I can tell you, as someone who is like the second I was like, oh shit, I have to go gluten-free, I was like, all right, what options are there in beer? That's the first thing I did. And there are more and more every day. And you know what? They are not bad. I can tell you this right now. I have been a very big fan of Omission. They make a fabulous pale ale. So what is your process? Gonna go back to that, for developing and releasing new beer. Doing seasonals. And so you're developing a new beer, you've got to brew it, and you've got to release it, and you've got to plan for all of the stuff going into the release. So that could be a several month process. I mean, it could be a couple year process, depending. If you're doing sours, it could be. You never know. And so I tell people when they're planning stuff like this, think of the end in mind and work your way backwards. But you need to keep all these things in mind. Markets, consider trends and market style preferences. Pilsners are making a massive comeback. Josh, at CBC, Pilsner. It was Pilsner, and that was, I tried at least 10 different Pilsners while I was there. If you're in a position that you're being invited to participate in a hops futures contract, good luck to you trying to anticipate trends. I mean, you already know this game. I don't even have to tell you. The amount that you have to invest in sophisticated, consumer analysis and stuff is already there. And are you keeping in step with your competition? Some other things that are happening here in Tennessee, Yazoo just sold their facility in downtown for $10 million and to open a massive facility. And they have their entire sour program has already been offsite for several years. I mean, sours are not going anywhere. They are here to stay. Okay. If you are not thinking about going down that sour route, you might want to be, because Lord, is it huge. And I don't think it's like alcoholic milkshakes. I don't think it's a flare. I think it's here to stay for a little while. Given the investment I'm seeing a lot of breweries making in doing it. So, if you're seeing that everybody else is going towards this direction, should you be going or just not, or just going the complete other way? I mean, that's something you got to think about.
Yeah, I think definitely to evaluating having evaluation as part of the process. What is your process on? Like, are we gonna chase after and do hazy IPAs? Are we gonna do brewed IPA? Like, what is our process deciding that?
Did you see the hat that I saw a picture of a hat at GB? Somebody in one of our local Facebook groups sent a picture of a hat. It's like the Trump hat, and it says "Make IPA clear again." As soon as you said that, I was like, I saw the hat.
Yeah.
So at the bottom line, do these processes, whatever process, from marketing, distribution, R&D, are they going to allow you to grow your brewery? Okay, that's always the goal in mind here, is that growth aspect. Okay, let's talk about people. So important.
So people, if you are trying to grow and scale your brewery or company, you can't do everything. You literally cannot do everything. Like you have limited.
But you can't.
You can't do everything, and you may want to try. You and your other owners are working the brewery may want to try, but that just won't work. So people becomes a very big, important topic in growing and scaling the brewery, because if you don't have the right people in place, then it's not going to go the way you want it to go. So, understanding, we put these on 5 bullet points here. We'll talk through them. Who's on the team? Is everyone in the right role? Your process of hiring, that can, save you a lot by having a good process there. And if your process is weak, that may result in why you're firing a lot of people. Dealing with turnover and delegation management style. So let's talk a little bit about who is on the team. So when you look at the people you have in place, or the people you're going to put in place, you really need to kind of look at 2 different things. Do we have the right people? Do they understand your core values? Do they understand and get your brewery? Do they understand what's going on there? And then do they get it, want, and have the capacity to do the job? And that comes from, if everyone's read the book Traction by Gino Wickman.
The Bible of growing your business, okay?
Yeah.
We're talking about it at the end, but it is.
You want to get the book, yeah. It is, making sure you have those people who get what you're doing and can actually do the role that is assigned to them is important. So having them in the right seat. So, and that involves you too as the owner as well. You may be sitting in doing the sales part or the self-distribution, and that may not be your forte. You may have drawn the short stick at the brewery, and you're doing that. And that may not be where you should be at. So understanding what that role you have and being accountable to that role you have is also important, and understand and making sure that we have the right person in the right seat. One of the things I think we want to avoid here was what I call all the hat syndrome. And we've seen that. I've seen this many a time where the brewery owner or owners are doing everything. And when they go and hire and bring people in, they're not delegating effectively out. They're basically, those people are just kind of doing a set task or doing what the owner tells them to do at any given point in time. And the owner is still in control of everything. And that, again, doesn't scale. You may have 10 employees now or 20 employees, and you think, all right, we can do this. But if you have not gotten yourself out of the places you shouldn't be in, the brewery just can't grow. And if you're wearing all the hats and you're handling the sales function, brewing the beer and working the tap room and doing the books and, handling the marketing aspects, right? Like that just isn't going to work. Even if you have people that you hire to do that and you're not effectively delegating that out to them, you're still in control of that.
Do their job.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Basically what they end up being is, they're servants to that particular thing you tell them to do, and they're sitting around saying, what can I do next? What can I do next? And they're not owning the process that they should be owning. So you want to avoid that when you're looking at, okay, who are we bringing in and who are the right people, both either internally people we're hiring or externally the people that we are, whether it's your lawyer, accountant, your marketing person, what roles are they filling in the company. And ultimately making sure everyone is also in the right role too. And that again starts with the leadership. We mentioned up here all the hats again, but I've seen situations where you have 2 owners, they're 50-50 owners, and no one is taking control of the situation. No one has the delegated accountability of what needs to happen, what they're responsible for, and where they get to make the decision. And so then everyone stares at each other and points at each other, and nothing actually happens. Or we get in a situation where we have too many people, too many cooks in the kitchen, basically, and no one is responsible or assigned responsibility for a particular role or task or seat or job in the company, and everyone's trying to do everything and get in each other's way. Another thing we see too is no one is leading the company, right? So someone's got to be in charge and make kind of the final decision, and no one's actually doing that. They're so focused on doing their particular sub role. They're focused on either brewing the beer or running the tap room, that no one's actually looking at the top level and saying, okay, what are we actually doing here? What's our plan? So it starts with the owners who are working in the business, the leadership. They have to have assigned roles, assigned accountability of what they're doing. once you get there and you start looking at the other roles and other places that you bring people in to serve in the company, we want to make sure we have a mechanism or a process in place to identify when there's someone who is not in the right role. So if we hire someone as our taproom manager and they are letting all their friends drink for free and they're not keeping after their the bartenders and being on time, or keeping the drawers tallied out at the end of the day, that that person is not fulfilling the role, and we need to get them out of that role. Otherwise, we can't grow. If we're giving away all of our beer for free, we're not going to grow, right? If there's no control over the cash drawer, we're not going to grow. So we got to get the people out who are in the wrong roles and replace them with someone who can fill that role effectively. And that person may change too. What happens and works in year 1 may not work in year 3, may not work in year 5. And as the company grows, if that person can't grow with that role, then they need to be moved on or changed, or someone else has to fulfill that role. And ultimately too, growth can't happen when there is not an alignment in the vision. So if the person in charge of operations, the person in charge of sales, and the person in charge of finance aren't in agreement with what's actually happening, what our goal is 5 years down the line, or what our vision of the company is, and they're just doing what they think makes the most sense, we're not going to have growth there either, because they're going to be in conflict with each other, and we can't do what we need to do when we need to do it.
And I know we keep kind of coming back to processes, but I find there's actually quite a comfort in process, because the first time you hire someone, you might get to a point where you just have a really hard time because there's an emotional thing about letting them go. They may be like the worst taproom manager ever, but you just can't fire them because they're your buddy or whatever. Yeah. But if you have already established a process and say you need to be hitting these key performance indicators or key KPIs, and you're evaluating them on, and we're going to talk more about that in, when we get more into employee stuff, and they're not doing it, then the process says, the equation says you got to go, or you got to go here or whatever. And instead of it, you take it from being an emotional decision at that point, because whoever said that business is not personal is full of crap. Because it is. Mm-hmm. But if you can take it back into being a systemic thing, it does kind of take the decision out of your hands and makes it a little easier to make.
Correct. Yep. Right. When we look then, so the process behind hiring, here's another process, right? Ultimately, we want to find the right staff, the right people for the job. So we need to make sure we have a process in place that gets that, right? We don't just want to be hiring our buddies and our friends and the guy who sits at our bar every night and is like, hey, it'd be really cool working in a brewery, right? Like, that's not the process to do it. I've seen that happen. It doesn't work. It's a failure here. So what is your process in finding qualified staff? Where are you going to look for that staff? What type of experience do they need to have when they work there? Whether it is, whether it's in the tap room or it's in production or it's in packaging or it's in sales, are they qualified to do that role? They can't just be your buddy or your friend or someone you like or a family member. They need to be qualified in there. And not only do they need to be qualified, we need to have people involved in making that decision within the company on how we're hiring. So we don't want to necessarily say, all right, the owner is going to make all the hiring decisions and the tap manager isn't going to say of who's going to be in the tap room, or the head brewer doesn't get to say who's going to be their assistant, right? Like, we need to understand who is involved, what role we're trying to fill, who's involved with that, and have those people involved in making that decision. Again, we want to get the owner necessarily out of that part so that the people who have ownership of those areas can take ownership and actually hire the people they think that makes sense for what that role entails. And I think they're part and parcel in this too is making sure we're hiring for the culture we have, right? So if someone's not the right fit, someone doesn't buy the vision or the culture or what's going on, hiring them and hoping they change is not necessarily going to happen, right? They're not going to change. So they need to be a right fit. You're not going to change them. They need to be able to fit what's inside. So they could be very highly qualified, but if they're not the right cultural fit, then that's not going to be the right hire that you have. So building that into that process. And I've seen where breweries they'll have different people, who would they be working with be part of the hiring process or doing an interview. Just to assess, hey, would it be, would I have a good working relation with them? Would they be good to work with? And getting that buy-in. And if there isn't that buy-in on that culture piece, then they may, we need to look elsewhere for hiring.
And you might want to think about, so one of our local breweries here, they're opening a brewery that's going to be associated with a university out in the Murfreesboro area. And I was messaging with him on Facebook, and he had gotten 600 applications because I had someone who was working at a bar downtown who was looking to get into the brewing industry. And he says to me, Rachel, if he fills out the application right, he's going to get a phone interview. It's that we're at that point. I was like, oh boy. There's other problems going on with that, but that's one thing. But, I mean, and for my firm, I can also say this, I get inundated with requests for interns all the time from the local law schools, and I like to toot my own horn. Number 1 and 2 in the law school class wants to come work here. But you know what? 1 and 2 in the law school class, they are brilliant legal minds, but they can't carry on a conversation to save their life. And I cannot be in a less than 700 square foot office with you all day long. And I've interviewed them, and I just can't do it. So I feel this. My personal philosophy is, I can teach somebody to do anything. Truly, I can. I cannot teach you not to be an asshole. Bottom line. So if we already have those issues, not going to be good. Not going to be good. So hire for personality and cultural fit, and realize that you can teach them to do other things. If they are bought into who you are and what you do, I guarantee you that they'll be enthusiastic enough to learn whatever it is you have to teach them. So employees. So that kind of leads us into that aspect of things. So they can be your greatest asset or your greatest liability. And the point is, you decide. I know that there comes a point in your business where you feel like you're not in control all the time. Well, you have to remember that you're in control. Okay. So let's kind of separate employees into high level and low level. So your higher level employees, if you have hired a head chef, if you have a very sophisticated tap room menu, which some of them do, but we're really talking about head brewer. We're talking about maybe assistant brewer, head of marketing, any of those head of department things. If we've gotten to that point, you want to make sure you're compensating them appropriately, benefits packages, insurance types of things. If you haven't set up some sort of a SEP or 401k type of package, you want to have those types of options, and you want to have contracts in place for these people. You want to say, this is how much I'm paying you. This is your vacation and benefits schedule. And more importantly than that, this is, here in Tennessee, we are an at-will work state, meaning that we can hire and fire at will. But if we say you could be fired for these reasons, they are considered a causal reason, they can't go and file for unemployment on me. Well, they can try, but they're going to get denied. So we want to make sure that's in place. Other types of things like non-solicitation and possibly non-compete, not very well favored in brewery, but still non-solicitation, because a lot of times your head brewers end up becoming your kind of counterparts as also brewery owners at some point. So we want to make sure that they don't up and take all of your staff with you. It's not necessarily customers we're worried about. We're more worried about staff. If you spend a lot of time putting in a really good staff and your head brewer ups and tries to leave with all of them, yeah, we probably want to contract around that. Low-level employees, so your maybe your keg washers, your bar staff, things like that. We're not getting them to sign contracts. Now, there is paperwork they have to sign. They have to sign I-9s. Are we doing background checks on them? If you want to have employees, you may not be able to as servers, just saying. But, we are serving alcohol. So we do want to make sure that, at least in the state of Tennessee, do they have, serving underage related offenses on their record? Because if they do, we don't want to be employing them. Okay. That's a liability to you. And so we want to have a system process for keeping track of paperwork, and really, 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 really important, a process for grievances, internal and external. If you have a bar fight incident with some of your customers, there needs to be a process of taking statements, having things signed, and everything being T's crossed, I's dotted as much as possible. Internal as well. Sexual harassment is a thing. It is so pervasive in the workplace. You, as the owner, need to make sure that you are taking any complaints like that completely seriously, and you have a process for that. 100% cannot stress these things enough. And you can't have it later. You can't have it after an incident happens. You need to have it before you get the employees in place. And it's not that hard. You just need a process to document these situations when they come up. I cannot stress that enough. Oh my God. So that's with employees kind of in a nutshell, the things that we like to focus on. Okay, delegation, the bane of my existence. I'm like the worst delegator ever. Like I'll go, it's like taken me years to learn how to delegate. So the terms we're using in here are straight out of Traction. I'm going to give Gino Wickman a massive shout out here. So most brewery owners are visionaries. They're the idea person. They're looking to the future of the brewery, and they're looking 3, 5, 10 years down the road. And these people need to get comfortable delegating. And it's hard. It's so hard to let go of your baby. It's so hard to hand your child over to someone else and say, here, take care of this person and nurture them and feed them and make sure that they grow up to be the right people. It's really hard. The other thing that we need to make sure of is, and this is could be a come to Jesus, stare yourself in the mirror moment, but not all people who start companies are meant to see it all the way through from a managerial standpoint. And we call that from entrepreneur to CEO. The people that, if you really like making beer, if you love the aspect of the chemistry, if you are super, super jazzed about that, but managing people like keeps you up at night, then you may not be the right person to run this brewery. You may be better making beer. And that, now, society says, oh, you're supposed to move into CEO, but not everybody on this earth is made to be a CEO, okay? That's okay. If at the end of the day, your brewery is going to be more successful if you're not necessarily running and managing all the people and all of the detail-oriented processes that make you want to kill yourself, then maybe that's not what you should be doing, and you need to find somebody to do that instead. And that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that happens almost daily in most business. Okay. But you have to understand that, and you have to let go of that. And you might realize that you've put yourself in a less stressful position and put yourself in the right seat. So visionaries need to be balanced by integrators, people who create order out of chaos, detail-oriented individuals. You can't have an entire 3 or 4 visionary owners without a single integrator in there. You've got to have people who can look at that person's vision and say, okay, this is the steps that we need to take to make it happen. That's the type of people you need to look for. And so when you're looking to kind of round out your team, some of these personality assessments are absolutely hugely beneficial to help you find where you are missing, where you've got voids in your company to help it grow. Okay. Additional capital. Obviously, we can't grow without money. Josh, tell us how.
Oh, yeah. So this is, I think this is a question a lot of brewery owners ask themselves. Hey, we're growing. We are starting to get the capacity. What are we going to do now? And a lot of times they are looking at this and they just don't know where to go, or they look at their balance in their bank account and say, maybe I can't do anything here. So I think when it's time to seek more money, obviously you're going to know the growth of your business. Hopefully you're looking at financial statements and seeing how your revenue is trending and all that. But we also need to take that and with that do some forecasting and say, based on what we're seeing, based on the trends, based on what we are expecting to do, where are we going to shake out here? And where are we going to run into issues? We're going to run into issues where we're going to run out of money because we are expanding too quickly, or are we going to run into issues where we're going to have so much cash in hand we need to do something with it? So doing that forecasting analysis, doing that forecasting cash flow analysis will help kind of determine, okay, when is the time to seek more money? Are we running into a spot where we're going to sell all we can sell and we're going to kind of plateau there? And if we want to continue to grow, we need to, either buy more equipment or do some other measures in order to get there. And with that, that's kind of more the qualitative or the quantitative part of it. When you look at kind of the qualitative aspect of it is, what is our plan? I think, for a lot of breweries that year one is, hey, we're open, we survived, we made it, like, this is great. What's the plan 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Is the plan to be a hyper local brewery? Is the plan to be the next New Belgium? Is the plan to, I like
to call that world domination.
World domination. Yeah.
World domination, because that's a very different thing than I just want to,
sell some beer.
Mile radius from my location.
yeah, and sketching that out. Talk with their people in your leadership, if you're other owners, saying, okay, what are we actually trying to do here? Do we want to be running a brewery 15 years from now? Mm-hmm. What's our end game? What's our exit strategy here? Talking about that stuff now and thinking about it and planning for that is important, so you don't get into a situation where then you lose control and you don't have any options. In the book that I just read recently, Barrel Aged Stout and Selling Out, which is a whole about Goose Island, where it started, it grew, and then it was acquired by Anheuser-Busch. They got into a situation where they were growing so fast, they needed additional capital, but they didn't really plan for that. And to get the amount of capital they need to open up a second brewery location and to do what they need to do, there was no banks at the time willing to throw money at them. Investors were hard to come by because craft beer was still in its very infancy stage in 1990, in the late 90s, early aughts, and they didn't really have a kind of clear plan of what they wanted to do, and it really got themselves to the point where the only option was to sell their brewery to a larger brewery. That was the only option on their table, and they couldn't do anything else, right? And ultimately, we don't, while that's great and they got paid out and all that, that's not what you want to do. If you don't want to sell to Anheuser-Busch or to Miller at the end, you want to have some options in your tool belt of where you actually want to go and what your options are. Is it keeping it in the family? Is it, having to be employee owned? Is it selling to some other brewery at some point in time? Having that plan in place and working towards that is something that's needed early on. And if you don't, and if you're just kind of growing willy-nilly and ad hoc and you're not actually planning towards something, then that's where you can get in a situation where now you're running out of options. And then, the best option is not maybe the option you want to take at that point in time.
So here's a troubling statistic. Okay. I'm going to tell you something that nobody knows. Okay. 100% of us are going to die.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's nothing on this earth that is more inevitable than death taxes. Mm-hmm. So guess what is going to happen? And you want to be thinking about that now. We don't usually recommend that conversation in the first year because you're drinking out of a fire hose. You got enough on your plate. But year 2 is the appropriate time to start thinking about, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? Do I see myself doing it? You got a good taste of it. And the question is, do you want to be drinking it for the rest of your life?
Mm-hmm. When we then look at, we say, hey, we do want to grow. We want to get to a certain size. We want to, accomplish these things. Okay. Now we need to see how much money do we need and what is it actually be used for, right? So first, let's start with the pinch point. Is the pinch point where we're going to run out of capacity and we need to buy more equipment to be able to meet these goals? Is the pinch point that we need to get our beer out as far and wide as possible, and we don't have the ability to do that right now? Is the pinch point we don't have the right people in place, or we need bring the right people in place in order to reach these growth goals? So figuring out what that pinch point is, and then we can identify, okay, how are we, we have this pinch point, we need to buy 4 more fermenters in order to reach our growth goals in the next 2 years. Where is that ultimately money then going to come from? Where we know what we need to use it for, we know what we need to do. Where is that money actually going to arrive from? So either it's going to arrive from the operations of the business. So you're doing so well, you're saving some money and retaining it. At some point, you have enough there, you can go and buy that piece of equipment or hire that person or invest in expanding your footprint. Or you don't, and you need to get that money from somewhere else. And when it comes to that, getting money from somewhere else, we identify that's either going to come from basically 2 places. One, we're going to get investors. So people are going to put money into our business, or we're going to get debt financing. And so we have to identify, okay, which one of those is our best option if we need to get that additional funds. So if we are looking towards investors to provide that, If we already have investors, are we going to go hit them up again and say, hey, we got these plans, we need your help here? Or are we going to bring new investors in? And what's the implications of doing that? If we're going to bring in other investors, what does our operating agreement say about that? Do we have, issues of dilution, or we already issued all the capital we said we're going to issue, and we need to now create a new class of shares or new class of ownership? What happens with dilution, right? If I'm bringing a bunch of new investors in, how does that affect my previous investors? Are they going to get diluted out, or I'm going to get diluted out as the owner, right? Like my share is going to get lost there. So how is that going to work, and understanding that? Because while it may be easy and it may seem cheap to go and get the money from some friends and family, and that, gives you that stuff you don't have to worry about alone, it still has its consequences, and it still has its implications that you have to consider there. The other option is obviously going to get the debt financing. So whether that's going to a bank or getting a lease arrangement on a piece of equipment, figuring out what that is, what the cost of getting that is. What do we need to provide to the bank? What does the bank need to see? If we're getting a lease, what are the implicit rates we're paying in that lease agreement? How long is it for? Do we have a bargain purchase option at the end? Understanding that debt situation, because when you go for the debt, you can't go in that well too many times, because the bank isn't going to, once you reach a debt capital ratio or other parameters in there, the bank will stop lending to you. They say, you've kind of reached your fill of debt, so we need to use that strategically and not just go and grab some lines of credit or rack up some credit cards and buy stuff doing that.
Yeah, you don't want to take these types of investors you can't really do impulsively, but debt you can. It's very easy to wander into debt. You can't wander out of debt. Okay. Yeah. So, you have, like, again, with the whole, I'm going to hammer this home, you want to think about the end in mind. And as hopefully you're not getting overwhelmed. Like, there's a lot to this growing and scaling thing. And the answer to that is, yeah, there is. But you want to take it one step at a time. So you want to, pull back the layers of all of these options and spend the time doing the diligence. Visionaries want to go. They want to move forward. They want to, open second location yesterday. They want to expand the brewery yesterday. But you have to take the time to look into, make sure that we don't open something too quickly and then have a wasteland of mess for Josh and I to fix. Okay. While we both enjoy that in the sense of that's what you pay us to do. Yeah. We'd much rather do it in a much more systemic, controlled manner. We both like that better. It's better for everybody's stress level. Really, it is. You're much happier doing it slowly and controlled than making us clean it up later.
Right. And if we're going to go get this capital then from investors, we're going to have to do evaluation. And so we have to figure, okay, what is our brewery worth now? Obviously, that hopefully has changed since it was when we opened it up, but we have to look at what our methods of valuation are, what that means, right? So, whether you're looking at a cash flow method, we're discounting our cash flows and seeing, okay, what does that produce as a value? Looking at sales multiples, so looking at when breweries have sold, you may see, like, hey, it's 3 times revenue or 4 times revenue is what they're selling at. Let's look at that as a metric. We're going to look at recent sales. So, we know brewery X.
Right now, Josh, 3 or 4 is the multiple?
I see between 2 and 3. It can be higher than that. Wow. Ballast Point got a crazy good multiple, but Constellation overpaid a little bit for that. The panic bot.
I learned something today.
We have recent sales, so if there's another brewery that's kind of similar to us and they sold for a price, then that kind of gives us some values. Or we can look at what are our assets, what's the actual equipment, and put a premium on that. But we need to look at all those kind of in tandem, right? We can't just cherry pick what the best value is and say, oh yeah, I saw Ballast Point sold for 16 times sales revenue. That's what my brewery's worth, right? That's not going to fly.
you know.
We can all hope that's the case.
You know what? You hear all these stories, but you know, most of those are confidential, and I guarantee you they're full of crap. You know, it's like telephone, where it starts and where it ends ain't the same thing. So just be very wary and take those types of things with a grain of salt.
Right. Yep. And when we look at it, we look at these all in kind of tandem with each other and see what they all say. And likely some of these valuation methods are going to say similar things. And so we can have a good sense of what our value is. And then we need to assess, okay, do we need a form valuation? Does our legal agreement say that? Do our new investors who are coming in want that? We can do a little like, hey, it's 3 times, our gross revenue is like, here's the value, right? And a potential investor may not buy that, or
I call that the quick and dirty valuation. Most investors are pretty, they can do math too. Yeah. So, I'm a fan of the valuation process. I don't think you need to do it yearly because it does get relatively expensive, but like maybe every 3 to 5 years, it's not a bad, it gives you a great snapshot of where you are and possibly where you could improve. It really is a good thing to know.
Yep. If you're going through this, looking for investors, you're going to have to go through this process and have this valuation, unless you have a rich grandpa who's just going to throw money at you and they don't care. You're going to have to go through this, right? So understand there's cost to that, right? If you need a form of valuation and you're bringing in a valuation firm to do that, there's going to be an expense to that. You need to factor that into the money you're trying to get, and understand what that entails. So. And if the evaluation does not come out to where you thought it was, then you need to assess the ramifications of that as well, because you can't just forget that valuation that happened. You have to, now that's a piece of evidence that we have, and we have to deal with that.
Mm-hmm. All right. We've got like 4 minutes, so we need to blitzkrieg through here. Strategic planning. I feel like, I'm talking about all this stuff, and all this stuff like jazzes me up because I actually enjoy all this kind of stuff, but hopefully not all of you are just groaning like, oh God, I don't want to do any of this. But goal setting is so important. And I love that we're doing this talk now, because now is when you want to be sitting down with your team to talk about next year. It's not December. It's not January. It's now. Okay. I actually just had my call with my accountant, which was fabulous, on Tuesday. Make sure I don't get too much for April. But now you want to be sitting down talking about 2019 goals. And we want SMART goals. SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Okay. So again, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive. So you want all of your goals to achieve those, to go within that acronym. And you really want, and you'd be surprised at how sophisticated you end up getting with these things. I'm actually meeting with my business coach next week, and we're starting a process for 2019 planning for us. Because you've got to have an idea of where you want to be, because if not, then you don't have anything to drive towards.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And two, you have to look at it as you look at these goals, they have that realistic part's important, right? And so understanding what the industry is looking like and understanding how your peers are looking like through a benchmark analysis is important, because you may believe that you can grow 200% next year, but if that's not reality, then that's not a really good metric to be utilized. And so understand what's going on in the market at large. And this ultimately also gets back to forecasting, of looking at these kind of where we forecast our numbers out to be, what are kind of our high level goals, and are we, as we're doing the forecasting, evaluating that to our actual analysis, so we know, hey, is our forecast legitimate or not, right? If our numbers are way off, then we know, okay, we got to retool that forecast as a result. And another part in the strategic planning process is also looking kind of the macro and microeconomic trends. So from the craft brewer industry at large, right? We're moving more from a growth industry to a mature industry. What does that mean? How does that change the macroeconomics there? How do tax cuts and tariffs, treat that, right? So if aluminum's higher, that's going to be a higher cost for you if you're canning beers. If you expect there's going to be a recession, okay, or maybe the growth of the business is not going to be the same as it was last year. are we taking that into consideration in our analysis of planning, right? It's not always going to be rosy, right? At some point, the market's not going to be where it needs to be or where it should be at. And you have to deal with the consequences of a recession and how that looks, right? So, and the same thing goes with expansion. If there is, a lot of growth, like, are we actually are we riding that wave, or are we doing things that aren't allowing us to do that? And then also looking at your macroeconomic trends, what's happening locally. Are other breweries doing well, not well? Are they struggling? Are they succeeding? Is there competition pressures? Is there law changes that are affecting us that change kind of the dynamics of the economics or how we're operating? So understanding that and figuring that out is also important in looking at strategic goals. We can't just look at ourselves in a bubble. We have to look at everything kind of surrounding us and how does that impact us.
Yep. And then very briefly on expansion. So the two options you really have are expanding your existing facility, meaning can you grow into a space next to you? Opening additional facilities, opening tap rooms in other locations, opening smaller micro or nano breweries in other locations. Doing that smaller version in other locations could allow for, that could be your offsite R&D. In some places, you might have to in order to have multiple locations. It really is going to depend on your laws. Ultimately, for that, it's going to come down to what makes the most sense from a revenue and expense standpoint. Distributing out of state. So if you have the capacity if you already have enough capacity to grow into, and you're ready to start moving outside of your local area, there's a lot of legal issues you need to keep in mind. Foreign qualification of a corporate entity. Do you need to register as a foreign LLC or corporation in the state that you want to go to? And are you going to be subject to their taxes? Do you need to get licensed in some form or fashion with the alcoholic beverage boards there? You're probably going to have to, beer's going on my computer right now. You're going to have to do definitely label and product registration is absolutely going to be a thing that you're going to have to do. Choosing a distributor, again, your due diligence. You need to talk to other brewers and engage an attorney so that you understand the contracts. The laws are vastly different from state to state. If you don't have the ability to so if you're now going to be like Sam Adams. So Sam Adams does not ship their beer from Boston to California. They have contract brewing relationships or alternating proprietorship relationships in other places in order to, do to brew their beer so that it's fresh in the market that they're going into. And is that an option? So we were mentioning traction. This is this is the Bible. I mean, it is the most. Josh has the book. So I recommend buying the book as Josh has it in hard copy. If you get it on Kindle like I did, you're going to want to buy it then in hard copy. So you're going to give the man twice as much money, which is fine because he really deserves it. Because you're going to want to write in it. And then go to his website because he has a lot of worksheets to download. At this stage in your business, you should be buying cases of this book and giving it to all of your people and making it a book club that you guys read it together. I mean, so huge. And then Josh has something special.
Yeah. So we have a 4-pack guide you can get on our website that talks a lot about what we talked about today about growth and scaling and some of the things to consider. So that's another good resource. And Rachel can also talk about her book. Why don't you, as I'm pimping my own thing, you can pimp your own thing.
My book is about dealing with partnership relationships. It's called Marriage Without the Sex, and I mean this is a book you really should have read in year one because it's really talking about how to get into the relationship the right way. But it also has that fun stuff. If we didn't do it in year one, then you can do it in year two or really anytime. But it also talks about if we've got to get out of a relationship. So it discusses that as well. You can get it on Amazon. You don't need to get that in hard copy. You can get that in Kindle. So just a little teaser for next time. We're going to be talking about exiting because like I said, 100% of us are going to die, and change and changes that come out. And I love this slide that says, we did it. Let's get out of here. And so talking about that and moving on to something else in your life or, any of that kind of stuff. So stay tuned for that in October. If you are attending GABF, have a fabulous time. We are sad that we're not there. Wish we could be. Maybe next year. But We are, I can announce now officially, we are going to be at CBC with a booth. So you want to come and look for us because we're going to have some fun stuff for that. And we are hopefully going to be talking, Josh and I will be talking at that. We're crossing fingers that the BA lets us do that. So we'll see you guys in October. But I think that's all I've got. Josh, you have anything else to add?
That's all I got. See you next month.
All right. Bye.